Welcome to Channel AMEC, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name is Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Are you interested about migrating to Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on the little bell on the side if you're on YouTube. So once we have all the updates and news, you'll be the first one getting all the insight. Now we are in a very exciting month as the new financial year of 2022 and 23 had kickstart, although we have not received any notification and news yet in regards to all the state nomination criteria and also the federal government's quota. However, I'm still very positive in regards to the changes coming up, especially for the next 3 to 5 years. Obviously, due to a pandemic that we have gone through, and inflation and the rise of interest rate and the economy, I don't think in the short term it will actually turn into a fine status as like pre-COVID. So if you have followed my channel long enough, you'll notice that every time as I study and research on the history of the past of Australia, every time there's economy issues, immigration policy is always there to support in order to flip around the economic side. Anyway, today's video is all about skill migration. Now, have you considered to study in Australia? Now, there has been so many international students coming abroad and studying in Australia, and I notice a lot of them, well, if you have just graduated from high school and you want to come to Australia to get your bachelor or master degree, perhaps you have never really thought about migration or skill migration at all, because we got to think about this while you are still back at your home country or with your parents. When you consult with a lot of agents and my education agencies, they don't tend to tell you what those policy for skill migration will be. So that might not be a consideration upon your choice of being enrolled and study abroad in Australia. So in this video, what I'm going to talk about, or well, we can share with your friend who wants to come to Australia and study, is that, well, if you really consider to study abroad in Australia, you should really consider and understand, not fully, but at least the basic concept of skill migration. So you don't graduate in Australia and end up with, oh, so what do I do now? Do I want to stay? I've spent here for 3-5 years. I really want to stay, but my occupation or the university I'm studying at doesn't give me enough point in order for me to be nominated by the state government, or perhaps staying longer in Australia. So there's so many people have been facing those kind of questions and queries once they graduated. So this video is here for the people who wanted to plan ahead. Well, plan ahead is always good, although there's so many things and changes coming up during the pathway to whatever you're seeking for, whatever you dream for, whatever you plan for. But if you don't plan, you definitely fail. Correct? So at least you got to plan ahead, so at least you have a direction and pathway. If things do change, there's always way to steer and turns. But if you don't plan, it's very likely you'll fail anyway. Have you heard of this term? So this video is all about this. Now, so the first thing is obviously somebody, or you perhaps, seeking to study abroad and gain a better qualification. You always consider the ranking of university and also consider the courses which is better, and obviously that's for your career profile as well. But you probably will never consider its migration status once you graduate. If you get extra points, if you get that extra incentive, and you don't get disadvantages after you graduate. So many people nowadays graduate in Sydney and Melbourne and they struggle. Why? Because Sydney and Melbourne is no longer a migration friendly cities. Why do we say that? Let's jump in there and have a look. This is the point test system. Now, specifically, I'm picking at 189 because 189 is generally the independent skill migration that's nominated by the state, by the federal government, and there are also 190 nominated by the state government. Now, the only thing that we need to watch out for a skill migration is its points that you actually get. You will actually be able to add up with the points that it's required for you to actually be there. So you can see here, you need to be at least 65 points. Now, I've gone through a lot of video discussing details of all those points, so I'm gonna go through that again. Now, if you want to know more, I've done hundreds and hundreds of videos in regard to skill migration. You might want to check them out in my channel. There's hundreds of videos. All you need to do is search within my channel. You'll find perhaps a lot of solutions there. So now point has calculated that you can pick either 189 or 190. Now the differences is that they will be a state nomination, a state giving you extra points. So if you don't pick state, you only choose 189 as we have spoke with. Now what's gonna happen is the points table, let's go in there and have a look. It will not include the state points. The state point is extra 5 points. Now how do you get the state nomination? It's generally that you're required to actually get into the state criteria. Now I'm not going to go into the state criteria today because it's so complex with different states, and obviously we're at a change over a financial year, and there is an expectation of though these states will update their criteria. Currently the best state here in Australia is South Australia, where they accept almost every occupation, and the requirement of English proficiency is 6 only. That's the minimal. If you're looking at Queensland, it's going to be 7. Western Australia, it's going to be 7. But people may argue, what about Tasmania and Northern Territory? Yes, Tasmania and Northern Territory can accept English proficiency with IELTS 6, but the problem with those states is it's a smaller economic state where they only receive a very minimal quota, and that means you are in competition with a lot of international graduates. So it's not a favorable state that I always want to refer with. But anyway, let's jump into the actual points. So you gotta make sure things that you need to watch for is these questions, these points. So you need to know whether you're coming here to study master or just coming here just to study bachelor. So if you're gonna be bachelor, you probably will end up between the age of 18 and 25, so you get 25 points only. But if you study master, you get 30 points. So there's a strategic playing ahead while you're choosing to go further onwards from higher education. Now obviously people may ask, no, why don't Carl talk about the diploma and also those the tradies like chef and carpenters and things. Now obviously you can choose those one, but you probably don't get as advantage as studying a higher degree until if the new government do have some change of policies coming up. The English is another key as well. You got to make sure that you reach as high as you can. So if you cannot get IELTS 7, so then you don't go to cities like Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane, because they only nominate people with English proficiency over IELTS 7 with the proficient English under the definition. So if you cannot get that high, might as well not pick those states, because if you go there, you will not get any nomination. So the trick here is that obviously if your goal is just to study and complete your qualification, that's fine. But I will tell you, 99% of international students, once they graduate, they will think about how to migrate. For sure, every one of them will think about this. So if you do know and you already seen those trains in the past, why don't you plan ahead for something that's better for you to migrate while you study abroad in Australia? So that's the key here that I wanted to refer this and transfer this message to all of the viewers today. Okay, so if your English is less than that, obviously you may pick somewhere that's more English friendly state, for example South Australia or Tasmania or Northern Territory, or perhaps that's the only places you can go. But if you want to hit like somewhere like Perth, Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne, well, for sure you got to be ready that you need to get IELTS 7 across all board. Otherwise, for there's also regional Queensland, regional Victoria. There's really limited number you can choose in regional Victoria and regional New South Wales. The reason I'm saying that is the incentive that the state of New South Wales and Victoria provided for skilled migrant, it's much less than the region they provided in regional Queensland. So you might as well pick Queensland better, so you can study in Townsville, Cairns, and Gold Coast. A lot of people go to Gold Coast. Gold Coast is considered regional. Can you believe that? Anyway, you may want to know more about that. There's some good university down the coast. Now, after you graduate, you get your graduate temporary work visa. And what the government, the system, want the graduate to do in order you get picked is that you obviously enter into workforce to help the economy, to pump the economy. So if you work in Australia under your occupation, you get more points there. Okay, so that is the key here. Now obviously education is, everybody will get that as well. I think the key here that I wanted to I wanted to speak about and set the message over to all the viewers, if you consider to study abroad in Australia, you really need to study harder. Well, not on your subject, but on the pathway perhaps to get a qualified visa and perhaps migrate further onwards, because there's just so many people, they don't plan. Well, they plan to study, but they have never had the knowledge to know to actually plan ahead, further ahead of the completion of study. That means you want to migrate, get a further visa, because if you don't plan that ahead, you got to think about this. Once you complete your study, perhaps the only way to go is go back home. Well, if that is your goal, that is fine. But I can tell you 99% of the international graduate, once they finish their courses, they always have that thought, maybe I should stay longer in Australia. And how do I stay longer? That if you have that thought already, probably you haven't really planned well. So what I'm trying to say here is plan ahead so you don't fail. But if you don't plan, you definitely fail. Anyway, should you have more question, query, more than welcome to leave a comment right down below. And I see you next video. Goodbye.